Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. This is Noha Bakr from Egypt, the American University in Cairo. I'm talking to you today about a research I'm making for the African Union about the impact of the emergency of and regulations that were accompanied by or with COVID-19. Okay, the scope of work is the North African countries. So, according to the African Union, North African countries are Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Mauritania, and the Sahrawi government. Um, this area is the most affected area in Africa, and the highest death rate is there, and the highest infected number of people is there. Maybe also because these are the areas, or this is the region in Africa where there is the highest ability to test COVID-19, but before that, other areas do not have that ability. So we have more figures when it comes to this North Africa region. Okay, we're talking about North Africa, a region that was ill prepared for the pandemic, because we're talking about Libya, where there is a disastrous situation, a civil war. We're talking about Egypt and Tunisia, who are just out of revolutions and were working to build their economy and to limit the amount of polarization in the society. We're talking about an area or a region where there is also refugees because of what's happening in Libya. So this is the situation. In all the countries, except for the Sahrawi government, which we don't have, I didn't get data on, emergency law was set. So in all countries, emergency law was set. And also these countries, some of them established new institutions to deal with COVID-19 emergency, while other countries merged the existing institutions or did not make any institutions. All the 7 countries or the 6 countries made quarantines, and these quarantines were either partial by time or partial by location. They would make quarantines for certain areas that's highly infected. These quarantines have affected the economy terribly, especially those who are in the informal sector. As we know that in the North African countries, lots of people are working in the informal sector. However, some states have made action to protect these people who are in the informal sector by making packages for them, and by making even some institutions like in Egypt that is directed to help those who are working in the informal sector and who have lost their jobs. Other economic actions were taken also to relieve the people, like deferring payments, taxes, in order to support people. When it comes to minorities, refugees coming, especially in Mauritania and Libya, continue to suffer from, and with COVID-19, it's more difficult because they are living in very congested areas. As for women, we find that in Egypt and Tunisia, they were very alert that women would not be affected by all measures taken for COVID-19. So we have in Tunis, they were very alert that the issue of violence and women subject to violence and home violence, and there were lots of work done in order to avoid this. In Egypt, we find that there were worries that people would start to breach the law because the state is having loans on its hands, so simply they would not be aware, especially with FGM issue. Also, women we have a safety net program for women who are suffering from the economic reforms. It's called Takafur and Karama. They increased the portion of women who are benefiting from it. Also, women who are pregnant were automatically allowed to work from home. When it comes to the emergency law and elections, we find that in the North African region, there are no elections to come this year, but next is presidential elections. As for parliamentary election, Egypt will have a parliamentary election next year, 2021. We do not have the infrastructure for voting by electronic manners, so we don't know if it will be developed just in case that the COVID-19 continues, or the second wave, because there is fear that the second wave will be fiercer from what we're having now. When it comes to civil-military relations in North Africa, we find that the military has been very visible in solving the problem, regardless of the sensitivity of their being visible. They appeared in the streets, they tried to offer services, they tried to hold protests, like in Algeria, for instance. They tried to impose the quarantine, and in Egypt we find them also distributing masks and gloves at very low price and high quality for people to use. There were actions that were taken without parliament. So we find that the legislative system has been not fully taking action, or has not been fully working. We find that there were several decrees regarding the budget in all North African countries, where the executive system has simply taken decisions regardless, without going back to the parliament. Civil society has been very active in most of the North African countries, and I think it's one thing that we can say it's an opportunity in the crisis, because they built bridges with the government, who felt that the governments were not able to solve the problem without the support of civil society. Okay, in every crisis there is an opportunity. I think one of the opportunities is that civil society became empowered because of the need of it. I think that also people became alert that in such emergency situation we can see the role of parliament and the legislative system being shrink. So now there are talks about how constitutions should help, or should be revisited in those African countries, to handle the issue of, in case of emergencies, how what will be the power of the legislative system, and how we can maintain that they continue to work. I think also that we need to work, although the infrastructure when it comes to telecommunication has shown effectiveness in certain countries like Egypt, Tunis, and Algeria, still it needs to be further empowered for voting, and to allow room for freedom of expression, which now demonstrations cannot take place, or expressing freedom of expression can take place in the streets because of COVID-19. Also, we need to make less on regional level with the African Union. We need to make a department for lessons learned on how to handle similar cases, or how to deal with the second wave of COVID-19. Thank you.